I have a clip to play for you of Tomi Lahren, a Fox News contributor. You're seeing her there next to me. She is a right-wing political commentator, and I'll play a clip in just a moment of her begging, pleading with Republicans to stop their investigation into Joe Biden and focus on something else. Now, this is priceless for a couple reasons. First off, Tomi Lahren insists she definitely believes that Biden engaged in wrongdoing, and there's definitely evidence, even though it hasn't been brought forward, but she doesn't think optically people are perceiving it that way, which is a really strange argument to make. Biden's a criminal, but don't hold him accountable. And number two, it's just hilarious to see even right-wing political commentators realize how disastrous this entire sham impeachment effort has been. Here's Tomi Lahren on Fox News.
Both sides have been spinning this, obviously, and if this other televised hearing comes about, I can just imagine the ratings. But Jim Comer says the deposition was successful. They were able to prove several bits of our evidence. That's a quote from the congressman. The question the mainstream media keep asking is, where's the proof that Joe Biden got a dime?
Yeah, and that's going to be the difficult part for Republicans. And I got to say, as somebody who does believe there's plenty of evidence here, I think that this has failed optically for Republicans, and they've done good work. Obviously, Jim Jordan, Comer have done great work on this, but optically, it does make it seem as though they're beating up on someone with addiction issues. That's exactly what the media wanted it to look like. That's how they framed it. And unfortunately, that's what's coming to fruition. So I would encourage Republicans, I know you want to get to the bottom of this, but let's focus on the election. Let's focus on the failed policies of Joe Biden. This impeachment inquiry, unfortunately, is falling flat with a lot of viewers and voters.
Tomi and I found common ground.
You were going to endorse everything?
You know, I remember covering a story about Ron DeSantis back when he was running for president. Good times, that didn't go well, but he said back then that Republicans should move on from the impeachment stuff and focus on other issues. So a similar point as you just heard Tomi Lahren make. He did, though, the same thing Tomi Lahren just did. He said he believed everything Biden's been accused of. He just doesn't think it needs to be the focus of Republicans, which, as I said back then, what? If a president actually did the insane things they're baselessly accusing Biden of, then yes, we would want them impeached for sure. What are you talking about? You would want to hold that president accountable. And because we here actually believe in law and order, we'd want that person to not be above the law and, again, to be held accountable legally. So anyone saying, yeah, Biden was bribed, but whatever, let's move on from it because it's not optically helping us, you're crazy. That logic makes no sense. What you're actually saying is, which you can't admit on Fox News, you know these allegations are baseless. Biden has been investigated for years now by Republicans, first in the Senate, then in the House, and has been vindicated at every single turn. And what we've learned throughout this entire effort, these investigations, the hearings, all of it, has been, oh, Joe Biden has acted with integrity, unlike the dear leader of MAGA. Now, by the way, I did want to address this part of what she said.
I would encourage Republicans, I know you want to get to the bottom of this, but let's focus on the election. Let's focus on the failed policies of Joe Biden.
The failed policies of Biden, she says. You know, Tomi, I'm curious which policies you're referring to. So let's go through it. Let's try to figure that out as we go through these policies. My regular viewers know exactly what's coming, but I have to go through this on a regular basis because most of the country apparently is completely unaware of these different facts. Tomi Lahren, all right, this is directed at you. Are you talking about the failure, as you called it, the policy failure of coming into office during a social, public health, and economic crisis he was handed by his predecessor, then overseeing a recovery better than any of us could have expected? Average 4% GDP growth for the last 2 quarters, 14 million plus jobs created under his watch, wage growth currently stronger than it was under Donald Trump pre-pandemic, stronger job growth after the recovery of all pre-pandemic jobs than we saw under Trump pre-pandemic, unemployment lower for longer than it's been in 50 years, black unemployment at record lows, white-black unemployment gap at record small, inflation back down to healthy figures, stock market breaking all-time records, and all those economic figures just 3 years after a total disaster that Biden had to inherit. Oh, Tomi, is it the big failure you're talking about? Taking the situation with crime from one of the largest homicide rate spikes on record in 2020 under Trump granted largely because of the pandemic, to the largest plummet in homicide in 2023 under Joe Biden. In 3 short years, taking surging crime back to pre-pandemic levels, and in places like Detroit, 50-year lows. Is that the big failure, Tomi? Is the big failure the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest investment in green energy in history? Forms of energy, by the way, that will be cheaper for consumers and lower their energy bills? Is she opposed to the fact that the IRA is lowering seniors' prescription drug costs in a historic fashion, allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices, something Trump promised to do, and capping the cost of insulin? Are you advocating, Tomi, for our seniors to be price gouged? Sheesh, that's crazy. Or is she opposed to the ACA expansions that will help people get the health care they need, or investing in the IRS so they can go after wealthy tax cheats who are unlawfully avoiding paying their taxes, a policy that, by the way, brings back more revenue to the government than it takes to fund? That's called, ladies and gentlemen, fiscal responsibility. Is she opposed to fiscal responsibility or a 15% minimum corporate tax rate? Tomi, do you not think that corporations should pay at least 15%? My goodness. Or is the big failure, let's just keep going, why not? According to her, the largest investment in infrastructure since the Eisenhower highway program, something, again, Trump promised to do but didn't. Biden got it done. She thinks maybe roads and bridges shouldn't be invested in so that they're safe and smooth. Investments in transit and rail. Do you think broadband shouldn't be out in rural, often conservative areas as these investments disproportionately go to? I don't personally think historic updates to airports is a bad thing. Do you? I also don't think a historic investment in updating water pipes so that 10 million Americans who don't have clean and reliable drinking water can start having that necessity, or investing in the grid so that we have more reliable energy. I'm just confused, What is she referring to? What are these policy failures she's referring to? Let's keep going. We'll see if we can find it. Surely she's not talking about the PACT Act, the expanded health coverage for veterans, the least we could do for those serving our country, or maybe the Chips and Science Act, making sure we aren't so dependent on other countries for semiconductors while creating jobs at the same time. They talk a lot about we gotta fight back against China economically, but Biden's record actually is doing something on that front. And again, jobs, so many jobs because of these policies. Surely she doesn't want Americans to not have those jobs. Sheesh, Tomi. And then maybe genuinely she would cite the largest forgiveness of student loans by a president in American history, but targeting middle and working class Americans. I think she's actually opposed to that. But by the way, helping to stimulate the economy, and maybe a variable as a part of the many variables responsible for these incredible economic numbers. She's probably genuinely anti-union, so she doesn't like that Joe Biden's been one of the most pro-union presidents in American history, not only becoming the first to join the picket line with striking workers, but also having an NLRB that's changing the game for unions, as we've talked so much about, among a bunch of other things on that front. I'm not sure if she sees, some conservatives go back and forth on this, but if she's seeing marriage equality being enshrined into federal law as a failure, but I definitely would disagree with her on that if she does, or the first major gun safety bill in decades, contributing to this historic drop in crime in the United States. And I could go on. I could sit here all day and walk through the executive orders protecting reproductive rights, trying to push back against the crazy right-wing efforts, orders reforming, the criminal justice system, investments in impoverished communities, policing, again, crime going down significantly. Maybe that has something to do with it. More people with health insurance right now than ever before in history in this country. And again, we could just go on and on and on. For the sake of time, I'll end the list there. So once again, I say, what policy failure are you referring to? Play the clip again.
Let's focus on the failed policies of Joe Biden.
Maybe she's thinking, again, genuinely of the border. That might be one of the things she cited if she were on the show. Of course, though, Biden pushing for the strongest legislation on the border in decades that's endorsed by the Border Patrol Union and a conservative Republican, James Langford, but MAGA Republicans are opposing that bill to hurt Biden politically. So that's a Republican policy failure if she were to cite it. Now, why do I go through this list so often? Again, my regular viewers are like, okay, this again. And then generally, why do I seem to speak so positively of Joe Biden's presidency? Because listen, I know this sort of coverage will get me accused, as I see in some aggressive ways in my Twitter mentions and on DMs. It'll get me accused of being a Biden shill or something like that. But see, it's anything but that. I think the job of those who cover politics is to cover it in a fact-based way and accurately. And then to those of us who do opinion shows as well, to present the facts accurately and then follow it up with your take on things. And what I've seen across much of the media is this huge fear, this crazy fear of being accused of being liberal by the right. And that causing an overcompensation that creates this inaccurate, wonky coverage of things like Joe Biden's presidency. Or just like how you have to cover the failures of powerful people accurately, you have to cover the successes accurately as well. And what I've realized is much of the country does not have any idea of the fact that Joe Biden has overseen one of the most successful administrations in modern American history. People just aren't aware of it. And so if that is the situation at hand, I have to convey the facts that yield that conclusion accurately. And that means properly walking through the policies that have been getting implemented. Something it seems far too many people in the media take the time to discuss. We can do 24/7 coverage of Joe Biden's age, but ignore the historic achievements that actually mean something in people's lives, to the material well-being that impacts them in a way, as I've been saying, that his age never will. And so it's never to blindly cheerlead just because he's better than the alternative or whatever reason, but to be honest with the audience when I think he's doing something right, and to emphasize that proportionally to the importance of the policies in people's lives. And so that's why we go through that list quite often. It matters to people. And the facts show this is a historic list. So let's make sure people know that. Let me know what you think of all that in the comments, and make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. If you want to go a step further and get the daily bonus show plus support the work being done here, you can go to lukebeasleyshow.com/membership.